Nye the Science Guy. Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Science rules.
Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Inertia is a property of matter.
Is one of the primary means of communication between the cells in your body. You can't physically live without it. Well, the most amazing thing about the nervous system is that it can send messages quickly, faster than the blink of an eye. This means you can coordinate your movements, such as walking down the stairs. The best part about your nervous system is that it can reset quickly.
The dendrites receive incoming action potentials in the form of neurotransmitters. The cell body is the bulk of the neuron and includes the nucleus, mitochondria, neurofibrils, and the Nissl substances.
The axon hillock is where the action potential is generated. Information received from all the dendrites accumulates, and if the threshold potential is reached, the axon hillock will send an action potential down the axon. The axon is a long, skinny trunk of the neuron that increases the reach of each individual neuron. It connects each neuron to another and carries out the action potential.
The myelin sheath includes all the Schwann cells, which are fatty tissues that surround parts of the axon. They help protect the neuron and conduct the signal down the axon faster. Through saltatory conduction, the process of the action potential jumping between each one of these spaces on the axon, called the nodes of Ranvier. This is where the movement of ions actually occurs.
The axon terminal is where the action potential terminates. The axon terminal will transfer the action potential to the dendrites of the next neuron through neurotransmitters, and the process begins again in the next neuron. But how does a neuron actually send a signal? This is what action potentials are for. An action potential is the changing membrane potential of a neuron through the opening and closing of voltage-gated ion channels. Take, for example, this volleyball net. Let's pretend for a moment this is a neuron membrane. Those with basketballs are voltage-gated sodium channels. The one with volleyballs is a voltage-gated potassium channel. I am the impending action potential. Where I am along the membrane, the inside of the cell is more positive than the outside. Where I've yet to go, the inside of this cell is more negative than the outside. When I reach the first sodium channel, my polarity causes the voltage gate to open. Sodium ions flow into the cell down their concentration gradient. This moves the action potential forward as the sodium ions cause the neuron to become more positive on the inside. As I move towards the next sodium channel, it too opens. Behind me, a potassium channel opens, and potassium ions rush out of the cell down their concentration gradient. This resets the membrane potential to its original concentration. However, there are now too many sodium ions inside the cell and too many potassium ions outside the cell. To combat this, the sodium-potassium pump starts actively pumping 3 potassium ions into the cell and 2 sodium ions out of the cell. This action is always occurring. Soon the neuron will be back to its original ion concentration and ready for a next action potential.
As the action potential that was just described reaches the axon terminal on the presynaptic neuron, it causes the calcium channels to open. These calcium ions, released from the channels, attach to the vesicles, which contain neurotransmitters. These neurotransmitters are the molecules that will eventually transmit the impulse to the next neuron. In order for that to happen, the vesicles, triggered by the calcium ions, will move towards the end of the neuron, towards the synapse. The vesicles, when at the end of the neuron, release the neurotransmitters into the synaptic cleft, or the space between the neurons, using a process of exocytosis. The neurotransmitters, now in the synaptic cleft, diffuse and bind to the neurotransmitter receptors on the postsynaptic neuron. The receptors, usually ion channels, open when the neurotransmitter binds to it. The neurotransmitters are quickly removed from the channels, causing the ions to stop moving into the postsynaptic neurons. This usually triggers an action potential in the second neuron. After this, the impulse moves along the postsynaptic neuron from the dendrites to the axon, and the process starts all over again. Okay. What happens when your nervous system doesn't work properly? Certain neural diseases can affect your life dramatically. Multiple sclerosis, for example, destroys the myelin sheath, causing nerve damage. MS can cause vision loss, chronic pain, impaired coordination, and death. The nervous system is an integral part of the body. Without it, nothing would be the same.
I know who you came here to see. If you a freak, then you come on with me. And I know what you came here to do. Now bust it open, let me see you get loose. It's going down for real.
Exactly.